stay indoors, not to leave your land. The police are here to protect you.
The sight of armed police on these streets has been disconcerting for many. The warning from senior officers has been extremely disturbing.
But local people held firm.
They were remarkable. Let's not forget, had that developed into a sense of panic, then I think there's a real danger that we end up having to deal with that more than dealing with finding Moat. And because of the resolve that they showed, we were able to focus on the job in hand.
At times, it was a close-run thing. A man matching Moat's description was reported approaching one of Rothbury's schools.
It's every parent's nightmare, and it sends a shiver right through you. We had the armed officers there. They were sent immediately to the school with directions to stand between the school and the threat. If he'd have been sighted, there is no way we'd have allowed him to get to that school. Absolutely none whatsoever. He'd have been stopped. If I had been required to take decisions to protect the public that would result in the loss of his life, I'd have taken them within a blink of an eye.
It could easily have developed to a potential Dunblane situation. At the beginning of the week, Moat had seemed controlled and targeted, but this was a man who'd been on the loose now for days, not sleeping properly, not eating properly, and there was a concern that he'd become even more disturbed and anything could have happened.
For the family of Moat's murder victim, Christopher Brown, the police manhunt had an added level of intensity.
The police would phone me every day, 2, 3, 4 times a day, let me know what's going on. I wanted to know everything.
We were really angry in that week. We just wanted him, like I think most of the people wanted him caught, whether it be dead or alive.
Given the difficult terrain, the police called in some very specialist help. Expert tracker Ray Mears.
We developed a tactic to get him safely into the woods, to be protected, to allow him to do his work. There was a definite track picked up and he tracked for some considerable way inside the woods. I do feel, and speaking to Ray, that we were very close. We were very close with that track to where Raoul Moat was in those woods. And there's no doubt in my mind, I do feel that played a part in Raoul Moat coming out of the woods a few hours later.
And so, 7 days after the killing of Christopher Brown and the maiming of Samantha Stobbart, the endgame began. It was 7 p.m. on a pleasant summer's evening, and Raoul Moat calmly strolled into Rothbury, carrying his shotgun.
Keep moving, please, folks, for your own safety.
One resident was worried that her mother might be in danger.
There's woods just behind hers, behind where the man is, and there's marksmen all over, and she's absolutely terrified. She's in tears, and I can't get her out.
4 armed police officers jumped out the car, and he had the gun in his hand, and they asked him to drop his weapon, and he refused, and then he put the gun to his head. He was stood there with the gun to his head.
Within minutes, Moat was on the ground, his shotgun pointed at his own head. A standoff had begun, and over 6 long hours was to be broadcast around the world.
We're now being moved back. The cordon's being moved away from our initial vantage point here for everybody's safety. Police reinforcements have clearly arrived. There's a lot of concern going on here.
Despite fortune seemingly having been against the police up until this point, this is just what they had planned for. Moat was surrounded by armed officers, and police negotiators could begin a conversation.
Their role is to try and bring the attention of Moat away from his current predicament and try and give him some sort of a lifeline. Try and convince him that there actually is something worth living for, something other than the course of action which he clearly had in his mind.
Friends and family of Moat offered themselves as potential go-betweens.
I thought that if there was any chance of him putting that gun down, I thought maybe somebody who cared about Raoul, rather than just the police force, might have had a better chance of getting him to do that. I didn't want him to die. That was the last thing on earth I wanted. You know, there'd been enough bloodshed already.
Moat told the negotiators he'd never had a dad, but his real father, whom he had never met, made himself known to the police.
When he said to the negotiator, "I have no dad and nobody cares about me," that was the moment to say, well, actually, you do have a dad. Your dad's been very concerned about you all week. A man in that position who's always in his life wanted to talk to his father. He knows he's perhaps moments from death. He would have wanted to believe I was his father. I would have been pushing on an open door.
There was a number of people, be they associates, be the family, be the friends, every one of them was considered and risk assessed. And the decision was made that it wasn't appropriate, it was too dangerous. Any one of them could have given him his opportunity to effectively cleanse his conscience and then take his own life. So it had to be very, very carefully managed.
Of course, the only person Raoul Moat said he wanted to speak to was Samantha Stobbart, the ex-partner he'd put into intensive care.
For me, she would have been the last person, because she was the reason that he had started this whole episode. And it could have been the reason for him to finish his life. For me, that would have been way, way too risky. Risky for her and risky for the whole situation.
There are no rules that say we cannot use third parties in negotiation. It's not that we rule it out. I'd far rather rely upon trained, highly trained, experienced negotiators to actually do their job professionally, which is what we did.
At 10:30 that evening, the standoff looked like turning into a farce when former Newcastle and England footballer Paul Gascoigne arrived on the scene.
Paul, good evening. You're live on Real Radio. I just wonder, tell us about Raoul Moat, the Raoul Moat you know.
Raoul Moat, I knew him years ago. He used to be a bouncer at Newcastle. He was like a gentleman.
From somewhere he got this idea that he was the one who could bring a peaceful end to the Raoul Moat siege. So he armed himself with some cans of lager, he armed himself with a fishing rod, a loaf of bread and some roast chicken. He rang a taxi and he headed up to Rothbury.
But I told him he will not shoot me.
Well, it's a dangerous situation though, Gaza, isn't it?
I'm not scared of it, yeah. Hey, listen, I've just been in a car crash, hit a wall at 9 million an hour. I survived that, I'm sure I can survive a bullet.
Paul Gascoigne now says he's unsure whether he did know Moat or not, and that the whole episode was a daft thing he did while emotionally unwell.
Wish Moaty well, he'd be all right.
Conscious that the eyes of the world were upon their force, Northumbria Police Command thought hard about how to deliver the best possible outcome, given the armed standoff now in place.
I did not want to have a plan that only had one outcome, which was that we kill him.
Police knew Moat had made suicide threats in the past, and days earlier, when they'd raided his abandoned house, they'd found what they believed to be a hangman's noose, and no less than 6 suicide notes, written to social services and friends. And one to Samantha Stobbart, which read, "Sam, I can't go on without you. I love you so much, and miss you very, very much. Maybe now you'll see just how much."
Given the events that happened after he was released from prison, I think there's a fair assumption there that they were written in and around the time before he went and shot Christopher and Samantha. So they suggested to us that he may be suicidal.
But the police were determined not to allow Moat to commit suicide by cop.
The simple fact of the matter is that I have a legal obligation, where possible, where practicable, where I can, to protect his life.
A key consideration was whether a new type of non-lethal taser shotgun, known as the X12, could be used to bring him in alive. However, the weapon is not approved by the British government.
I'm taking a risk. But I'm taking a risk in circumstances in which, what is the alternative? We're going to use it as an alternative to firing a bullet, or to watching him fire a bullet into his own head. And it's in that sort of context that I authorised that as a weapon to be issued and deployed, and I have absolutely no regret about that whatsoever, because it just might have given us an opportunity to bring him in alive.
But the police seemed to be battling against the odds.
His state of mind was clearly very disturbed by the stage. This was at the very end, and all along Moat had made it clear that he was never coming in alive. He was never going to end up in court and back in a prison cell. He was determined about that, and he told the negotiators a number of times, "This ends in this field tonight."
As the armed standoff went into its 6th hour, the rain began to fall in Rothbury. It must have seemed to Raoul Moat that now even the elements were against him. Raoul Moat lay cornered by the riverside in the Northumbrian village of Rothbury. One of the UK's biggest manhunts was finally over. Around 1 a.m, the rain started falling. Moat hadn't slept for more than a few hours during the past week. A fresh team of armed officers had just taken over watch to relieve their exhausted colleagues. It seemed to them that Moat's mood had darkened during conversations with the police negotiators. Suddenly, Moat moved his shotgun from under his chin to the side of his head.
At that very, very moment, it was the officer's belief, and I think the belief of every person who was there, that this is it. He's going to kill himself. Right at this very moment, he's going to kill himself. Now, what do? Do you stand and watch?